a smile that could thaw the coldest day. She was studying literature, and we often crossed paths in the library. She laughed when I admitted I only went there because it was quiet enough to nap between classes. We fell in love naturally, with long walks, late-night study sessions, and shared dreams of the future. When I met her family, however, something felt off. Her father, Mr. Timur, was everything my father was not. Where my dad was humble, Timur was proud. Where my dad was honest, Timur was cunning. He ran a successful construction business and often boasted about the connections he had with politicians and landowners. To him, life wasn't about being good, it was about being powerful. Still, he put on a polite smile when I visited. He shook my hand, calling me son, though it felt like he was sizing me up for a deal. I didn't care back then. Love blinded me, and I thought we'd earn his approval eventually. After graduation, I started working in a small textile export company. Within 3 years, I was promoted to regional manager. I was making good money, and more importantly, building experience and connections. That's when I proposed to Sarah. I remember that day clearly. I took her to the place we first met, surrounded by books and the quiet hum of the library lights. She cried and said yes. It was the happiest day of my life. Her father invited me to his study. He closed the door, sat me down, and with a calm smile said, "Listen, Armin, I don't doubt you're a good man, but my daughter is used to a certain lifestyle. Are you sure you can provide that?" I looked him in the eyes and said, "I'll be rich now, but I will spend my life making sure she has everything she needs. I'll build it with my own hands if I must." He leaned back, hands if I must. He leaned back, studying me. Then he said the words that would haunt me until the end. He said the words that would haunt me until the end. "We'll see. We'll see." What I didn't know was that behind that polite expression was a scheming mind. Scheming mind. One that would soon destroy everything I'd worked for. Sarah and I got married in a modest ceremony. My parents were emotional but proud. Her family looked at us like we were a risky investment. But it didn't matter. We were happy for a while. I worked harder than ever. I built strong relationships with international clients. And they trusted me. I became the head of negotiations, and soon my company was earning millions thanks to deals I helped secure. That's when Timur came to me with an offer. He said he wanted to partner with me. He told me he'd been watching my progress, called me driven, determined, flattered me with talk of thinking like a leader. He wanted to create a new business, something massive, something that would make us both richer than we ever dreamed. Asked me to bring my insights, ideas. Bring the money, the land, and the resources. Sounded too good to, and that's because it was. I agreed. Out of greed, but because I trusted him. He was my father-in-law. He was family. More than anything, I wanted to give life she deserved. I left with the blessings of my body, believing it was to build something of my own. I poured months into design proposal, meetings and suppliers, negotiating terms. Business took. Timur became distant. He stopped taking my calls. Documents I needed were in progress. Legal agreements were delayed. One day he disappeared for 2 weeks. With all the paperwork. When he came back, it felt like something had changed. His eyes were cold. His handshake was hollow. And then it happened. One quiet morning, I was called into his office. He sat behind his massive... I was called into his office. He sat behind his massive desk, with lawyers standing on either side like guards. He tossed a folder onto the desk, full of papers bearing my signature. You signed over your... full of papers bearing my signature. You signed over your rights, Armin. Rights, Armin. You're no longer a partner. You're not even an employee. You're no longer a partner. You're not even an employee. My blood froze. I opened the documents. I had signed them during the rushed filings and registration phase. He had tricked me. Hidden clauses. Manipulated agreements. I had nothing. No business. No money. No ownership. No ownership. I treated you like family, I said quietly. He laughed. You were a tool. Nothing more. Now get out before I have you escaped. That was the day I lost everything. My job. My savings. My pride. When I told her. She cried. She begged her father to explain. He said I was lying. That unstable. That I was trying to steal from him. He told her she could stay with him or follow me into failure. She chose me. I would never forget that moment. She packed her bags, held my hand and said, "We build again. From zero. Together." But life wasn't done breaking us. We moved into a small apartment. I tried finding work, but word had spread. Timur had powerful connections. I was blacklisted for breach of trust. No one would hire me. My father fell ill around the same time. Stress. Heart trouble. I sold my bike and paid for treatment. My mother cried quietly when she thought I wasn't looking. Sarah's pregnancy was the only light in our lives. Our son was born healthy, with my eyes, Sarah's smile, and a name that held the hope of a new beginning, Zion. But the world was about to take one more cruel swing. When our son was only 3, Sarah fell sick. She kept telling me it was just fatigue. But one night she collapsed. The doctors said it was late-stage cancer, one of those rare forms that hid quietly until it was too late. I begged, borrowed, did everything I could to save her. But even the strongest love cannot fight time. She passed away in my arms, whispering, "Armin, promise me, build your life, show them what real strength is." And then, she was gone, 34 years old, widowed father, ruined, alone. Something kept me going. Maybe it was her work, maybe it was our son, sleeping quiet in the next room. It again, freelance consulting first, and digital working late nights while Zion beside me. Every act I landed felt like climbing up from a pit with my bare hands. I learned. I adapted. I grew. Within 5 years, I opened my own export firm. 10 years, it had grown into a national chain. One day, I heard that would change everything. Business had collapsed. Investigations. Corruption cases. Everything was falling apart, including his legacy. And his only hope was to reach out to the one person who still held the keys to those international partnerships. Me. The man he betrayed. The man he broke. He wanted help. A letter. Let the past. Forgive me and build together. For family. Smiled. That day hinge didn't feel fire. Like just. For you. I car beneath my rib. Invisible, but aching. Every time I saw a father hold his daughter's hand, I wondered how a man like Timur could betray his own blood. Every time I looked into my son's eyes, I promised myself, one day, Zion, you'll know what strength looks like. Not in words, but in action. By the time I turned 45, I had rebuilt everything and more. My company, once a dream, was now a global export powerhouse. We supplied textiles, tech accessories, agricultural goods, across 7 countries. My father, may he rest in peace, to see just of what I became before he passed. And though I still longed for my mother's softness and Sarah's laughter, I built a life they would be proud of. But now, destiny was placing something in front of me I never expected to see again. A letter, sent by the same man who stole everything from me. written with shaky hands. Signed, Your father-in-law Timur. It looked professionally typed, but I could sense the panic under every line. His real estate empire was gone. 2 major corruption cases had stripped him of his assets. He was in debt, deep debt to loan sharks and lawyers. The once feared construction tycoon was now an old man with no friends. And he needed me. I read his letter over and over, quiet with disbelief. Armin, I ask help, not for myself, but for your sir. Let's rebuild what we lost. I am still your family. Family. That word again. I set the letter aside, grabbed a glass of water, and stood by the window. Outside, the sun was rising. My employees were arriving, greeting the guards, running into the office with purpose. A life I fought for, a life he nearly destroyed. But this was not a simple revenge story. This was my story, and within it was another life that deserved the truth. Zion, now 15, walked into the room that morning. His face had lost its baby fat. He had grown taller, sharper. He even wore an expression just like Sarah's father sometimes, a certain distant defiance. That scared me more than I admitted. Dad, he said softly, seeing the envelope. Is that from him? Yes, I said. He leaned back on the couch, looking at the floor. So what are you going to do? I didn't answer right away, because I didn't know yet. For years I had thought of revenge. I worked late. Every bottle of cheap milk I poured for Zion back when I was struggling. Every rejection email from companies I tried to apply to as a failed entrepreneur. I thought of the day I'd look that man in the eye and say, I rose without you, and now, you need me. But now that moment was here, and I was no longer the revenge-hungry young man I once was. I was a father, a leader, and most importantly, I was free. Still, I needed to confront him, face to face. The next day, with the letter folded in my coat, I drove to his last remaining property, a half-collapsed farmhouse on the outskirts of the city. The same place where he once hosted elite gatherings. Men with power, women wearing diamonds, political speeches, dirty deals. Now it's walked up the dry, cracked stone, weeds growing through the soil, a lone figure in a wheelchair unarched. Fragile. It was Timur. His hair had gone white. His skin hung loosely against his bones. His eyes, once sharp and calculating, now seemed tired, almost empty. He saw me and smiled weakly. You came. I didn't answer, just sat across from him. For a moment we said nothing. The wind moved gently through the dying grass. A bird chirped. Somewhere inside the house, a clock ticked. You've done well for yourself, he finally said. You know I did that without you, I replied. He nodded, looking down. I know. I misjudged you. I laughed, once. Short. Bitter. You didn't misjudge me. You never tried to understand me. I was a stepping stone for you. His lips trembled. I was wrong, Armin. I looked at him, angry, emotionless. But beneath that was something deeper. Sadness. Pity. Closure. I lost everything, he continued. My company. My reputation. The lawyers will take that soon. Maybe months left. He coughed. I could have made you rich. You could have been my successor. I leaned forward. And instead, I made myself better than you ever did, because I didn't cheat. I didn't lie. I didn't step on another man's heart to get here. He sighed. Will you help me? I wanted to say no. I wanted to spit on the ground and walk away. But then, I thought of Sarah, of her last words. Show them what real strength is. Yes, I said finally. I'll help. He looked happy, but not to think. I stood, pulled out a document from my coat, and placed it in front of him. This is a partnership offer. I will rebuild your business under my company. You'll be a silent partner on paper. You'll have no control, no decision-making rights. In return, I'll settle your debts and give you a small monthly pension. He blinked at the paper. So I get nothing? You get what you deserve, I said calmly. Dignity in your last days. a roof over your head, and a chance to leave something behind instead of shame. He didn't speak for a long time. Then he nodded. I accept. I walked back to my car, my heart heavy but clear. Revenge wasn't burning their life down. Revenge was how high you climbed without latch. Years passed. I kept my promise. I settled his debts, rebuilt the company under strict terms. Timur lived quietly in a small assisted home until he passed, 2 years later. Alone, but not forgotten. At the reading of his will, there were only 3 people present. Me, Zion, and the lawyer. The lawyer opened a file and said, by Mr. Timur's final decision, all usable assets he possessed were transferred to the trust under Mr. Arman Khan's oversight. But he wanted to leave one thing exclusively for Master Zion Khan. I froze. What? The lawyer smiled. A letter. He handed it to my son. Zion opened it. Read it in silence. Then tears filled his eyes. He passed it to me. It said, to my grandson, I failed your parents. I tried to steal their future. But you are a chance for me to leave one last good thing behind. Be better than me. Be stronger than the pride that blinded me. Know this, your father didn't me from Donster. Sorry. The letter. Tears ran down my cheeks. Not for him, but for the cycle that ended with me. For the legacy I rebuilt with my own hands. For the son who would build even higher. That's how betrayal turned to redemption. That's how wounds turned to wisdom. And that was the day I realized that revenge isn't payback. It's growth. Every story has a lesson. And this one is simple. Let your enemies live long enough to watch you rise, and long enough for them to feel the weight of their regrets. There's a strange thing that happens when you get old. People don't look you in the eye the way they used to. They nod, politely. They soften their voices, like you're a child again. A fragile, breakable thing. My name's Walter Taylor, 73 old. I still believed my family saw me as the man I always tried to be. A father, a worker, a giver. I was wrong. That Christmas Eve, I overheard 9 words that cracked everything open. The old man learned his lesson. He won't fight back. That's what my son-in-law, Eric, said when he thought I couldn't hear him. He was wrong about that too. Started 4 months earlier. The leaves were just starting to turn gold around my little house in Meadow Creek. I live just outside town, a quiet place tucked behind old walnut trees. The house isn't mine, but it's mine. Built it myself with my parents the year after my wedding. 45 years of marriage. 30 of working in steel fabric. My battles every one of them. But I wasn't bitter. Not then. I spent my mornings carving wooden toys for the kids at the hospital. My afternoons? Mostly in my chair, listening to cassette tapes of old country music and waiting for family to visit. It was early September when my daughter, Lisa, showed up with coffee and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Dad, we need to talk. That's never a good sentence. She walked around the kitchen, touching bowls, shifting magnets on the fridge, nervous. Dad, Eric and I have been going over your finances. We think it's time you let us help. I raised an eyebrow. Help with what? She hesitated. With everything. The bills. The house. We worry about you being here alone. I laughed. Laughed hard. The day I manage my own is the day they put me in one with alarms on the doors.
No, Dad.
That's exactly what we're trying to avoid. Then she pulled out a folder. Thick, papers clipped neatly. Power of attorney forms. Property transfer requests. This is just so we can protect your assets, Dad. Until I felt the air drop out of the room. Until what? I died?
Esther here. Lisa.
Let me explain something. I have never needed anyone to manage my life. Her slickered. We just want safe. But I'd seen the way Eric looked at this place, the land, the space. Even Bob from the mail route knew property values had skyrocketed since the new tech companies moved in. I wasn't born yesterday. I just raised the people who thought I was. They left without me signing anything. But I could feel something shifting, a storm starting to gather. 2 weeks later, while clearing branches in the yard, I saw Eric walk around the property with a man carrying a camera. He sneaked a look at me from across the lawn, then pretended not to see me. That night I couldn't sleep, and that's when the phone calls started. Unknown numbers. Quiet hangs up. Then one night, a call that didn't disconnect. Look, if he doesn't sign, we just start proceedings. The voice was Eric's. I sat there in the dark, the receiver in my hand, hearing my son-in-law speak about me like I was already gone. That was the night something in me cracked. 3 weeks later, a letter came. Notice of pending probate application. Let me give you the simple version. Someone, probably Eric, was claiming I was unfit to manage my own estate. They wanted control of my property before I died, using my age and mental condition as justification. So I did what any man would do. I called my lawyer, Mark Henson, a good man, handled my will back when Helen was still alive. He listened quietly, nodded a lot, and then said, "Walter, they think you're too weak to fight." I leaned back in my chair and said calmly, "Well then, let's teach them how wrong they are." The next month was a blur of court filings, consultations, evaluations. I passed every competency assessment they threw at me. Mark had me bring in medical certificate, bank statements, proof of active insurance and tax compliance. Everything showing I was as functional as any man my age. The judge threw out the petition. But that was just the beginning. Because the moment that failed, they changed tactics. Instead of fighting through courts, they went for the jugular. My reputation. Neighbors stopped waving. A grocery clerk suddenly asked if I needed help remembering my purchases. And that was when the whispers reached me. They say he's forgetting things. He went a little funny after his wife died. Lisa's trying to help. Bless her heart. I realized my family wasn't just pushing legal papers. They were rewriting my story, turning me into a fragile old man who didn't know what was happening. Maybe that works on some folks. Not on me. One night, I sat on my porch under the stars. Cold mug of coffee. Lantern light flickering. I thought of my wife. She had a phrase she used to say when the kids fought. Just because someone shares your blood doesn't mean they share your heart. That night, I decided I wouldn't just fight back. I'd teach them. That's when the idea formed. And when Christmas rolled around, I was ready. Now let's jump to that dinner. December 25th. Snow on the roof. The whole house lit up. I wore my old gray sweater, combed my hair neatly, looked every bit the polite, aging father. Lisa hugged me at the door. Eric shook my hand with that tight, fake grip. "Come in, Dad," Lisa said. "Dinner's ready." The table was beautiful, candles, turkey, cranberry sauce, gluten-free bread for Eric's fad diet. I took my seat, and that's when I heard it, Eric's voice floating from the kitchen. "Don't worry, the old man learned his lesson. He won't fight back." Lisa laughed quietly. I sat there alone at the table and smiled, because in my briefcase in the hallway, beneath 2 folded scarves, was a dossier. A folder of bank statements, property titles, legal responses, and a declaration they hadn't seen coming. When dessert came, I waited till the candles burned low and their wine glasses emptied. Then I folded my napkin and cleared my throat.
Lisa.
"Eric, there's something I want to give you." They exchanged a look, like Christmas presents were about to drop. I reached for the briefcase, quietly unlatched it, pulled out a folder, placed it on the table. "This is my estate transfer." Eric's eyes lit up. "You're ready to." "Wait," I said calmly. "This is my estate transfer to the Meadow Creek Children's Hospital Foundation." They froze. I opened the folder, showed them signatures, mine, my lawyer's, and a notary seal. Every asset, the house, the land, the workshop, was now under control of a charity. They couldn't contest it. They couldn't fight it. Eric's face went red. Lisa looked like she'd swallowed glass. "You gave everything away?" I cut her off.
No.
"I gave everything forward. You tried to steal my life while I was still living it." You turned my love into leverage. Then, I pushed one more envelope across the table. Court papers. A defamation complaint. In my name. Against them. There's a moment right after betrayal where everything goes quiet. Not peaceful quiet. Heavy quiet. Like footsteps in empty hallways. Like snow falling on forgotten headstones. That's what I felt sitting there after handing Eric and Lisa the documents. Watching the two people I raised and trusted stare at me. Like I was the villain in their story. But what they didn't understand was simple. I wasn't fighting for revenge. I was fighting to reclaim my dignity. After they stormed out, leaving dessert untouched, leaving the gifts unopened, I sat alone at that table. The house was quiet. The old clock in the hall ticked once, twice, and then I cried. Not because of what they tried to take, but because for the first time in 40 years, I saw what my absence had built in them. Entitlement, disrespect, a belief that the old man would always shrink back, would always keep forgiving. That was the night I accepted something. Blood is not enough. Respect is earned. And it goes both ways. The next morning I called Mark, my lawyer. They got the papers? He asked. Yes, they did. He paused. And how are you feeling? I glanced out the window. Snowflakes slowly dancing over the yard. My old toolbox leaned against the shed like a sleeping dog. I feel like a man who just lost 2 people to gain back himself. He sighed. That's one hell of a lesson. 2 weeks passed without a word. No messages. No visits. Not even a how are you doing? That was fine. I had work to do. The Foundation Meadow Creek Children's Hospital had invited me to tour their new therapy wing. They wanted to put my name on a plaque in honor of Walter Taylor, a man who built in wood and gave with heart. I stood there, listening to kids laughing in the hallway, tiny hands pushing wooden toy cars I had made myself, and for that moment, I didn't feel old. I felt useful, alive. That feeling, it's worth more than 200 acres and a lakefront house. But life isn't done teaching, not until the very end. On a rainy Wednesday in February, there was a knock at my door.
Lisa.
She stood there wrapped in a black coat. No makeup. Hair pulled back. Eyes red. Can I come in? She asked quietly. I stepped aside. She walked in like she still lived there. Touched the wooden horse by the shelf. Ran her hand over the kitchen table where her kids used to do homework. Then she sat down and cried.
I'm sorry, Dad.
I was wrong. I said nothing. I ruin everything I touch. Eric's gone. He left. Took out loans in my name. Sold his truck. Said I failed him. Said you disrespected him. She wiped her face. And he was right. I failed. I almost lost you over a house and some land. I took a breath. He didn't respect me. And you didn't stop him. She nodded slowly. I know. There was silence. Rain against the window. Then she asked, can we fix this? You see, forgiveness is not a weapon. It's not a gift for the undeserving. It's a choice. And that day I made one. No, Lisa, I said. She froze. But we can heal. That's different. I poured her coffee. For now, we rebuild what matters. Not my house. Not my accounts. Just us. She cried again. This time it didn't break me. Healed me. Months passed. I settled into a rhythm again, hospital visits, toy-making, morning walks. Lisa came by every Sunday with her kids. We didn't talk about Eric. Not once. I heard through the grapevine he'd moved to another state, trying to start over. Some people called it karma. I called it a warning point. 1 year later, Christmas again. The house was full, kids, laughter, wood smoke curling from the chimney. I sat at the end of the table. Same seat, same sweater. But this year, when my grandson hugged me and said, Grandpa, tell us a story? I smiled, because the only lesson that mattered had already been learned. By all of us. I didn't lose my family. I just cleared the rot. And in the silence after betrayal, something new grew. Not revenge. Not bitterness. Just clarity. And maybe that's the lesson. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't winning the fight. It's knowing you stood your ground so the world won't mistake kindness for weakness. I didn't teach them with anger. I taught them with truth. And the truth, my friends, has one job. It stands even when the world tries to bury it. My name is Cody Walker. I am 67 years old, retired, widower, an aerospace engineer who once spent long hours bending metal, calculating trajectories, and dreaming of rockets that could escape Earth's pull. But those days feel like another lifetime now. These days, I wake with the sun, and my mornings are measured in the quiet hum of life that continues without fanfare. For 5 years, ever since my wife, Margaret, passed, I have built a gentle routine. I wake early, make coffee, and walk barefoot through the garden she tended. The roses bloom as she taught me, the coral ones climbing over the trellis, the creamy whites nodding in the morning breeze, their fragrance like an echo of her presence. Each bloom feels like a small conversation we still have, even if the rest of the world is silent. I believed life would remain soft, that the days would fold neatly one into another, like pages in a well-loved book. But that evening, when the sun began its slow descent behind the Blue Ridge Mountains, I was proven wrong. The first sound was subtle, almost dismissible, tires crunching over the gravel driveway. But it cut through the evening's calm like a stone through glass. I didn't need to look up to know something had arrived that didn't belong. The sound repeated, closer now, deliberate. A silver SUV came to a stop in front of my porch. The doors opened, and out stepped my son, Colt. His face was drawn, pale, the kind of pallor that doesn't come from illness but from carrying a weight too heavy for shoulders meant to be free. Behind him came his wife, Rachel, moving with the careful precision of someone used to measuring a room not for comfort, but for value. Her designer jacket looked absurd against the weathered siding of my house. They didn't belong here, and yet here they were. I wiped my hands on my jeans, forcing a smile.
Hopeful, tentative.
I approached them slowly, careful not to let tension crack my voice. Colt hugged me briefly, a motion without warmth, the kind that passes through a body without touching the heart. Rachel lingered near the car, scanning my home with the scrutiny of someone cataloging worth rather than visiting a father-in-law. "How was the drive?" I asked. Colt's answer was short, curt, uncaring. Rachel, however, stepped forward. Her voice was calm, cold, precise. "We sold our house in Charlotte," she said. The words hit me harder than I expected. That house, I had helped them buy it, lent them $40,000 when they first married. I had trusted them. I had believed in them. "Why?" I asked. My voice was calm, but my chest tightened. "The market was good," Colt muttered. "We wanted a fresh start." Rachel interrupted, her tone sharper than steel. "It's time to move on. We have plans, investments, opportunities. You wouldn't understand." I felt my stomach twist. Each syllable was a stone dropped into a deep well, sinking slowly but hitting the bottom with a hollow thud. "Where did the money go?" I asked quietly, steadying myself against the porch railing. Rachel listed it, item by item. Spa memberships in California, a new car, jewelry, a boutique venture with a friend. Each detail was like a fresh slap across my mind. By the time she finished, her arms were folded, her posture asserting dominance. Colt sat silently, hands clasped together, shoulders slumped, as though he were a boy again, a child who had forgotten how to stand tall. I remembered the boy he had been, and the man I had hoped he would become. But hope had its limits. I knew then what I had to do, though the word formed in my chest slowly, heavy and necessary. No. Rachel walked past me into the house, stating matter-of-factly that she would take a room upstairs. Colt followed, dragging the suitcases like a reluctant shadow. I stayed on the porch, staring at the empty space they left behind. The evening air smelled faintly of rain, though the sky remained clear. By the time I sat on the porch, night had settled. The mountains were dark silhouettes, the world hushed. I whispered Margaret's name, letting it roll into the quiet like a benediction. But the house behind me felt heavier, filled with footsteps that did not belong. That night, I understood something vital. Saying yes would destroy the remaining piece in my life. To protect what was mine. My home, my dignity, my memories, I had to choose boundaries. The word no became a shield, a line drawn in both sand and stone. Dinner that night was a storm contained within porcelain bowls and silverware. The table was set for 3, though none of us touched the food. Rachel picked at her salad, her nails clicking against the fork like distant, sharp bells. Colt stared down at his plate, silent and small. I tried to keep my tone calm. "Tell me again about the money," I said, soft but firm. "How much is left from the sale?" Rachel's eyes flicked to me, a cold smile forming. "Nothing. Money comes and goes. You wouldn't understand opportunity." Her words struck me, but I did not shout. I did not cry. I pushed my plate aside, the resolve in me hardening. "You cannot live here. You need to leave," I said, as clearly as the evening shadows falling over the porch. Colt blinked, confused. Rachel's face twisted with disbelief, as if my refusal were an insult of unimaginable magnitude. She called me heartless. Colt tried to intervene, but her words snapped at him too, cutting through the air like fine glass. She accused me of jealousy, of clinging to control, of being unable to stand the sight of my son married to someone younger, more ambitious. For the first time in months, the sun rising over Greenville County felt like permission to stand. The courthouse in Greenville County smelled of polished marble, disinfectant, and anxiety. I walked its halls with Harold Dean beside me, the weight of last night's confrontation still pressing against my chest. The folder with the promissory note was tucked safely in my briefcase, the proof of years-old trust now my shield. We entered the courtroom. Cold fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The seats were nearly empty, save for a few early spectators who had lingered out of curiosity or obligation. Colt sat a few rows back, shoulders bent, hands clasped, eyes fixed firmly on the floor. He seemed smaller somehow, the weight of shame pressing down on him. Rachel entered behind her attorney, Sarah Bell, her face carefully composed, but her eyes betrayed unease. Judge Patricia Miles entered quietly, silver hair glinting in the light, her presence commanding yet calm. She called the court to order with a voice that left no room for argument. Harold and I rose to present our case. First came the promissory note. 8 years old, yet its power remained. Colt's name, my name, Rachel's signature, all inked in the past but binding in the present. Harold laid it gently on the judge's bench. The room was silent. Every eye was on the paper, yet the tension in the air was palpable. Then came the video. I had debated showing it, worried it might humiliate Colt or Rachel unnecessarily, but Harold insisted. The slap, Rachel's hand against my face, replayed in clear, unflinching detail. The sound echoed like a physical force through the courtroom. Colt covered his face, unable to look at what he had witnessed but could not deny. 2 neighbors testified next. Their voices trembled as they described seeing the assault, the tension in the room, the fear they had felt witnessing it. The credibility of the testimony was unmistakable. Sarah Bell attempted to interrupt, to cast doubt, but Judge Miles silenced her firmly. "Family does not erase the law," she said. The room froze. Then the twist. Harold called Trent Miller, a man who had been involved with Rachel for nearly a year. Trent testified about the misuse of funds from the house sale, the jewelry, the trips, and the hidden apartment in Atlanta. Gasps filled the room, whispers bouncing from wall to wall. Rachel's composure wavered, and Colt looked on, heartbroken. Rachel admitted the truth partially, explaining the rest as care for her younger brother, who had cancer and lacked insurance. She spoke of guilt, necessity, and love. In that moment, her words humanized her, even as her actions remained indefensible. Colt's shoulders sagged further, and he whispered words I could not hear, probably apologies or confessions of regret. The distance between mother, father, and son seemed beyond repair. Harold closed the case with quiet strength. "This is not about revenge," he said. "It's about responsibility. Dignity cannot exist without truth." Sarah Bell asked for mercy. Judge Miles leaned forward. Her voice was calm, absolute. The facts are clear. Rachel Miller violated a legal agreement, committed assault, and deceived those who trusted her. Love does not cancel accountability. The verdict was clear. Rachel had to repay $67,000 within 30 days. Criminal charges were pending. The room emptied quietly, the finality of the law settling like dust. Colt approached me slowly. His voice cracked. Dad,
I'm sorry.
for everything. I looked at him, the boy I had raised, and saw him standing as a man for the first time. Forgiveness is possible, I said gently, but boundaries remain. The afternoon light outside felt soft, clean. Colt stood beside me, taller somehow, learning to carry both accountability and love. For the first time in years, I felt we were free not from mistakes but from their power to define us. A year later, life in Prescott, Arizona, was gentler. The sun rose over red hills, spilling orange and gold across the small backyard where the roses bloomed in shades of coral and white. Each morning, I tended them as Margaret once taught me, trimming, watering, whispering stories of patience and persistence. The air was dry, but the flowers, like me, found a way to thrive. The old house in Asheville was sold, along with the ghosts it contained. Moving had been easier than I imagined. A clean slate in a quiet street. Neighbors waved from porches, smiles genuine, and time seemed to stretch in a way that felt like breathing. Colt visited monthly, always bringing groceries or books, small gestures that carried weight far greater than money. Each visit, he brought not just repayment for the loan, but a rekindled sense of integrity. He was learning to live as a man who respected both the past and the present. Rachel rarely came up. She served probation, worked at a hospice, and helped her brother as best she could. One afternoon, I sent an anonymous envelope to the hospital to cover a few of his treatments. It was not for Rachel, it was for me, to release the last of the burden I had carried, to forgive without forgetting, to choose peace over bitterness. Life had become quiet, but not empty. The old lessons lingered. Love must have boundaries. Kindness is not weakness, and forgiveness is a gift you give to yourself before anyone else. Some nights I think of the trial, the shouting, the betrayal, but in Prescott, the desert light softens the past. Even the wind feels like mercy. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, I repaired an old clock I had found at a thrift store. Its gears had been frozen with dust, its second hand still. I cleaned it, reset the spring, and waited. When it ticked again, I smiled. It felt like time itself forgiving the mistakes, the heartbreak, the moments I could not control. The roses glowed in the twilight, the wind whispered through the pines, and somewhere in the distance, a train's horn faded into the night. I looked over my garden, hands steady, and asked a question I still do not have the answer for. When we choose to forgive, are we giving grace to others, or are we finally setting ourselves free? And in that quiet, I finally understood. Forgiveness is not the absence of justice. It is the presence of peace. I've reached an age where mornings feel familiar, where the creak of old bones, the softness of my pillow, the beam of sunlight sliding across my ceiling all feel like old friends greeting me gently. But that morning I woke up to strangers. A pale green ceiling stretched over me. The walls hummed with fluorescent light, and the sharp sting of antiseptic clung to the air, crawling into my nose and pulling me violently awake. I blinked once, twice, and then sat up slowly. This wasn't my bedroom. This wasn't my house. This wasn't my life. Before I could gather myself, a woman in scrubs walked past my doorway. I croaked out a hoarse, brittle, "Excuse me?" She froze, stepped backward, and gave me a smile I recognized immediately. Not a warm smile, not a relieved smile, a professional smile, as if she practiced it in the mirror every morning. "Oh, Mr. Patterson," she said warmly. "You're awake. How are you feeling?" "How am I feeling?" I repeated. "Where am I?" "Riverside Extended Care Facility." I frowned. "For how long?" 3 days now. 3 days. 3 whole days of my life, gone like a handful of sand tossed into the wind that I tested my arms, my legs. No pain. No weakness. No trembling. There had to be a mistake.
Un terrible, impossible mistake.
There's been some misunderstanding. I don't belong here, I told her firmly. Her expression softened, not with empathy, but with condescension. Your son, Marcus, she said gently, signed all the paperwork. He mentioned you might be confused at first. Confused. That word stung deeper than it should have. Because I wasn't confused. I wasn't foggy. And I sure as hell wasn't supposed to be in a nursing facility. I need to call my son, I said. Now. Of course. I'll bring you a phone. But the phone she brought wasn't mine. It was a little gray flip phone. The kind they hand to patients who might lose things. My smartphone was gone. So were my keys. My glasses. My normal life. She brought me a plastic bag containing my watch, my wallet, my wedding ring, and nothing else. Where is my phone? I asked. Marcus took it, she said simply. He told us you were calling random people and worrying neighbors. That was a lie. Clean, polished, rehearsed lie. I called Marcus anyway. When he answered, he sounded irritated, rushed, like I was a problem he forgot he had. Dad, I'm in a meeting. I didn't waste time. Why am I in a nursing home? Silence. Then a sigh. Dad, we talked about this.
No, Marcus.
We didn't. You had another episode. You were confused. The doctor said you needed round-the-clock monitoring. What episode? I snapped. I feel fine. I want to go home. Another long silence. Dad, you're not fine. You fell. You were confused. We'll talk about this later. I really need to go. He hung up, just like that, as if I were an inconvenience, as if I were a child. Something inside me twisted painfully, because Marcus, my only son, wasn't confused. He wasn't mistaken. He was lying, and lying with purpose. For the next 2 days I played along, not because I believed I needed help, but because I needed information. I took their medications, sedatives, I later realized. I went to their activities. I watched the staff, the residents, the routines. This place wasn't horrible. It was simply not for me. It was for people who needed care. People battling dementia. People at the end of their stories. Not someone like me, an aerospace engineer who used to design guidance systems for satellites. My mind was sharp. My memory intact. And that meant someone was trying very hard to make sure everyone believed otherwise. On the 3rd morning, a familiar voice burst into my room. Richard, what on earth happened? It was Helen. My neighbor for 3 decades, sharp as ever, fierce as a hawk, and just as protective. She looked around the room in disbelief. Marcus told me you had a stroke, she said. He came by with a moving truck last week. Told us you were going to live with him. My blood ran cold. What moving truck? I asked quietly. Richard, they cleared out your house. Everything. My chest tightened. My home, the one I'd built with my own 2 hands in 1985, the home I raised Marcus in, the home filled with Sandra's memory, gone. Helen? I said, swallowing hard. I need your help. She didn't hesitate. What do you need? A pen. Paper. And don't tell Marcus you were here. Her eyes narrowed. I won't, she said. And I'll bring something better. That night, she returned, holding a laptop. I know how to use it, she said proudly. My grandkids trained me. Together, we searched the county property records. And there it was. My house. Sold. 2 weeks ago. For $615,000. Far below market value. Listed as sold by Marcus Patterson. My throat closed. Helen, I never sold my house. Her hand trembled slightly as she placed it over mine. Richard, he forged your signature. Everything inside me went quiet. Cold. Steady. Focused. This is fraud, I said. It's worse, she whispered. It's a setup. We made a plan. Tomorrow, her grandson, a patient advocate, would come. But the next morning, something unexpected happened. Marcus arrived. And he didn't arrive alone. "Dad," he said, smiling too wide, "I want you to meet someone." A woman stepped forward. Pretty, polished, perfectly put together. "Mr. Patterson," she said sweetly.
I'm Vanessa.
Marcus's fiancée. Fiancée. The word hit me like a thrown stone. Marcus had mentioned dating, yes, but he never mentioned this. Vanessa stepped closer with a sympathy-soaked voice. "I'm so sorry about your condition." "My condition?" Marcus interjected quickly. "Dad, you have early-stage dementia. Dr. Patterson confirmed it." "Don't have dementia." Vanessa gave me a pitying smile that made my stomach turn. "It's common," she said, "for patients not to realize it." "Patience," I repeated slowly. "Is that what I am now?" I looked at Marcus, truly looked at him. He wouldn't meet my eyes. "Marcus?" I asked quietly. "Did you sell my house?" He swallowed. "I did what I had to do. You had no right." "Dad, you signed power of attorney. Remember?" "I didn't, because I hadn't." I felt my jaw tighten. "I want to see that document." "It's with my lawyer," Marcus said quickly. "Dad, fighting this will only make things worse." Vanessa touched his arm. "Honey, this is normal. Don't get upset. Dementia comes with paranoia." Paranoia. A neat little label. Easy to weaponize. They left shortly after. And as the door closed behind them, I understood one thing with absolute clarity. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't concern. This wasn't care. This was a plan. A calculated, coordinated plan to remove me from my life, isolate me, take my assets, and bury me in a facility where my voice wouldn't matter. But they'd made one mistake. I wasn't gone yet. Helen arrived with her grandson Brad that afternoon. Brad recorded everything. My story, my symptoms, the missing days, Marcus's behavior. "We need an independent evaluation," Brad said. "If you're sound, this becomes a criminal case." 2 days later, Dr. Patricia Wells, a geriatric psychiatrist, conducted a full assessment. 3 hours of testing. When she finished, she closed her notebook and looked me dead in the eye. "Mr. Patterson," she said, "you're in the 95th percentile for cognitive function. You're sharper than most 50-year-olds. Then why did my son say?" "Because," she interrupted, "someone gave you benzodiazepines for several days. Enough to create confusion. Sedated, drugged, manipulated." My chest tightened with rage. "Can you help me?" "I can testify," she said firmly. "And I will." That evening, Helen's lawyer friend, Thomas Brennan, arrived. He listened to everything. He made calls. He took notes. And then he said the words that confirmed my worst fears. This wasn't an accident. This was elder abuse, fraud, and theft. We had a plan. Get me released. Freeze my assets. Expose the fraud. Go after the house. Everything moved fast. The facility released me with apologies after Dr. Wells's evaluation. Angry. "Dad, what are you doing? You're not well enough to leave." "I'm perfectly well," I replied. "The independent doctor confirmed it." "That doctor is wrong," he snapped.
No, Marcus.
"You're wrong." Silence. And then anger. Accusations. Twisted stories. Excuses that sounded rehearsed. When he ran out of lies, Vanessa called smooth, calm, dangerous. She warned me to stop fighting, that I couldn't win, that no one would believe a confused old man. I almost laughed, because if I was confused, if I was weak, if I was lost, they would have gotten away with it.